So, welcome to the Great Canadian Economic Shit Show. Canada just got hit with a $78 billion deficit budget, and a Conservative MP literally switched teams on the same day. If you think your family budget is a mess, just buckle up because we're about to dive into federal level financial drama that makes any reality TV look very boring. This is probably the most exciting reality TV that Canadians have ever had. So where did this all start? Well, Mark Carney's Liberals just dropped a budget with a $78.3 billion deficit. That's 36 billion more than what was projected just last December. And then you have Pierre Poilievre on the other side. His conservatives are screaming bloody murder about it, except their own platform just 6 months ago also runs deficits. And in the middle of all of this shit show, we have a Nova Scotia MP named Chris Dondremont, who literally crossed the floor from conservative to liberal the same day the budget was dropped. Unbelievable. You literally cannot make this shit up. So let's break down what is actually happening here with both the numbers on either side. I really like to see both sides of the aisle to get a real clear picture of what's going on. And there's some numbers there that they're hoping on both sides that you just ignore. So let's start with Mark Carney's Liberals. Are serving up the budget includes $1.4 billion in new spending over 5 years. That's partially offset by $51.2 billion in cuts. But the word of the day that they keep using is generational. Finance Minister Francois Philippe Champagne used it 11 times in his speech and 45 times in the budget document. When politicians say generational, what they usually mean is expensive, but what we're framing it as is investment, so they won't freak out. So think about that. Their idea of generational is investment. But here's what I found as the actual definition of what generational budgets or generational investments are. Have a look here. So, in the context of government budgets, a generational investment is a slick euphemism for massive spending on grandiose projects or programs that primarily benefit today's politicians, legacies, and cronies, while saddling future generations with crippling debt, higher taxes, and the fallout from inevitable mismanagement or failure. It's basically investing in vote buying now with your kids and grandkids picking up the tab later. So when you hear them saying generational investment, think about that. Don't think about the fancy term that they think that, oh, this is an investment, because someone has to pay for these investments. So what are they actually spending money on? Well, they have 81.8 billion over 5 years for the military because NATO wants them to at least hit that 2% of the GDP target. And then you have $20 billion for infrastructure. And here I have it all spelled out for you guys. $7 billion for a new crown agency called Build Canada Homes. And when you think of, like, I was listening to a guy the other day and he was talking about the Build Canada Homes. A lot of these homes that the Liberals are proposing are actually subsidized for low income housing. So it's just not your regular home builder that they're focusing on. And then you have tax breaks for businesses to encourage investment. The savings plan, they're planning to cut about 30,000 public service jobs by 28-29. It's not exactly Doge level cuts, but still significant. They're also promising to trim consultant spending and make government leaner. So get this, the federal public service ballooned by 40% under the Trudeau government. And now Carney, who was Trudeau's economic advisor, is proposing to fix the problem he helped create. You literally, like I said, you cannot make this shit up. So you have the guy that advised the guy that created the problem, who's now head of the problem, and now he's going to fix the problem that he eventually had. You know, my dad used to say this thing all the time: you have a good memory, but it's short. And I think the Liberals, if they keep voting in the same thing, it's like their memory has gone from what you just had someone in power. They've had 10 years to fix this. And now they're saying, "Oh no, we can fix it again. We can." I don't know what. I don't know. Just throwing out there. But how about try something else? I don't know. Just a thought. So you have to really think about the deficit, and I know people don't wanna talk about the deficit, and those are the numbers they really wanna hide. And at 2.5 of GDP, this deficit is nowhere near the 14.8 we saw during COVID or even the 3.6 during the 2008 recession under Harper, but it's real. And still, $78 billion Canadians don't have. The Liberal pitch, this spending will stimulate the economy, create jobs, and pay for itself through growth. And why haven't they been doing that in the last 10 years? This is classic Keynesian economics. Spend your way out of trouble. And like I said, my dad was a left of left winger, NDPer, and he totally believed in Keynesian economics. He believed in Marxism. He believed in all this stuff. And I just don't think it's going to solve any problems. And if they want to have that approach, I don't understand is why haven't they been doing this all along? I don't if they've been 10 years in power. So I wanted to look now on Team Blue, what's having going on with the Conservatives and what are they promising? Well, they're promising $75 billion in tax cuts and $34 billion in new spending over 4 years. Their plan: cut taxes, slash wasteful spending, and let the economy boom its way to prosperity. So, what are they promising? I have it up here for you guys. Sorry, over here. They're promising 15% income tax cut, saving the average worker $900 and families $1,800. They want to build 2.3 million homes by cutting taxes and selling federal land, and they want to cut 56 billion in spending over 4 years. So where are they going to cut all this money from? Well, 24 billion by slashing spending on consultants and professional services, i.e., ArriveCan, which was the biggest absolute joke. I was talking to some Canadians here the other day from Vancouver. We were when we brought up the ArriveCan, what a fucking joke that is. They spent what almost $500 million on this app, and Trudeau picked two people that he knew, and they built it literally in their basement just outside of Ottawa. And it was absolutely useless, that app. And the reason I was talking to this lady because her daughter played in the States, D1 sports, and she had to go back and forth, and it was just ridiculous the how many hoops that she had to drive through or go through to get back and forth around the border. It was horrific. So ArriveCan would be the number one. Where did that money go? And Trudeau has no words to say how that was accounted for. And then you have 1.3 to 2.8 billion in foreign aid cuts. And I think Canada, they need to cut it all. They really do. We're a sinking ship. So it's like when you're on an airplane and you're going down and you're with your kids. Well, you got to put the mask on yourself first because you have to save yourself before you can save anybody else. And the amount of money that Canada is spending on foreign aid, it's ridiculous. They also want to defund CBC, the English part, but keep Radio Canada because Quebec votes matter. So essentially, the federal government is spending $1.43 billion per year on the CBC, which is their propaganda arm of the Liberal Party. They CBC should be able to, if they're such a newsworthy program and Canadians are using these services, they should be able to pay for themselves. The fact that the federal government has to pay $1.43 billion per year to the CBC is absolutely ridiculous. And if they can't be self-sufficient, maybe they got to turn around, look in the mirror and go, hey, why aren't we self-sufficient? Why can't we, I think even down the States, a lot of times the YouTubers, the podcasts, they have much larger audiences than they do on the mainstream media, and I'm sure it's going to happen in Canada. I see a lot of up and coming people on podcasts and YouTube channels that are all starting to talk rebel news. Love them. We need more people talking about what's really going on because I think the mainstream media, as you can see, it's literally funded by the federal government. They also have federal payments going to broadcasters to subsidize them. Again, I think it, i.e., propaganda. But anyways, the third and last thing is they want to eliminate the gun buyback program, which I don't think is going to have any significance because but I have know nothing about that. I don't see Canadians being big gun owners, like down here, like everybody I know has a gun, and in Canada, I don't know anybody that has a gun at their house. So, uh, if it's gonna help the deficit, all for it. But, anyways, here's the reality of it all. And here's where it gets very interesting. Even with all those cuts, the Conservatives project a $14.1 billion deficit by year 4. And they're supposed to be the party of, like, let's balance the budget. The Conservative platform relies heavily on the assumption that their policies will create an economic boom, mostly in oil and gas, but, it will rain tax revenue into government coffers. One global and male columnist literally wrote, Pierre Poilievre is counting on the budget balancing itself. Well, almost. The ironic thing is that Poilievre spent years mocking Trudeau's "the budget will balance itself" comment. Now, he's basically doing the exact same thing, just with more confidence and more energy. It's the balance, it's never gonna balance itself. So, I just wanted to step back and look out at the context of this all. Because both parties are playing fast and they're gonna lose, and history has proven that. The Liberal record, when Trudeau took office in 2015, he promised 3 small deficits and then a return to balance. That didn't happen at all, not even close. Instead, Canada got deficit after deficit. And then you have COVID hitting and spending well into the stratosphere, which, to be fair, most countries did. But after COVID, the spending never really slowed down and never came back at all to what it was before COVID. And don't even get me started on COVID and how much Canada was entrenched in COVID policy over policies. I don't when I see 2, in Calgary, I saw 2 hockey nets, roped together facing each other so kids could not play outdoor hockey, was absolutely the most ludicrous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Meanwhile, my kids here in the United States are, played there's I had 3 boys playing 3 hockey teams, that's 60 kids, that's 60 families, even more with grandparents and everything, and coaches and all that. They did not miss one game. They traveled from state to state, once, twice a month, and not one parent, grandparent that I know them all, we've been with the same team forever. Not one was hospitalized for COVID, no one died because of COVID. There was one grandfather, that went to the hospital, but he had pre-existing conditions from something else, and his wife was sick, so he was in and out of the hospital all the time, with her, so he thinks he got it, just being at the hospital. So anyway, like, Canadians and the COVID thing was just, to me, an absolute disaster. So the previous Liberal government's, fall 2024 economic update projected a $42.2 billion deficit. Now under Carney, it's jumped to $78 billion. And what's their defense? As a percentage of GDP, our debt situation is still manageable compared to other developed nations. So we're in the mix, right? But it's not good, but we're not totally out of the realm of what's going on around the world. But the conservative counter argument, Polyev argues that all the spending has driven up inflation, making life unaffordable. And that is true. When governments spend money they don't have, they either borrow, which is going to increase the debt, or they print money, which is going to contribute to inflation. Either way, you pay the price through higher interest rates, higher taxes, or higher cost. And he's got a point. I like Polyev. I think he's a smart guy. Except his own platform also runs deficits and relies on optimistic economic projections. And here's the uncomfortable truth of it all. Neither party wants to have an honest conversation about this. Canadians, they want Nordic level services, but American level taxes. And that math just doesn't work out. You can't have universal health care, robust defense spending, infrastructure investment, and low taxes without running a deficit. Unless you're like a country like Norway, where they have oil and they fund all this stuff. I think Canada needs to open up the pipelines, but that's just my opinion. So here's the plot twist of it all. that makes things, like, even messier. You got this guy over here, Chris d'Entremont, the Conservative MP from Acadie Annapolis in Nova Scotia. He resigned from the Conservative he resigned, sorry, from the Conservative caucus and joined the Liberals on November 4th. He literally the same day the budget was tabled. So who was this guy? My family's from the East Coast, they're from New Brunswick, and my mom's side of the family, they're actually, Acadian, French Canadian. So, it's sad to see it was, like, the one conservative guy out there, and he switches teams, it's unbelievable, you know? He was elected to Nova Scotia back in April 2025, and he won with just 533 votes. He'd been in provincial politics for over 16 years with Nova Scotia's Progressive Conservatives before going federal in 2019. So I was very curious, like, why did this guy switch? And his official statement was after serious consideration and thoughtful conversations with constituents, he decided the Liberal budget is better and serves his riding more. The unofficial reasons he wanted to be deputy speaker for the Conservative caucus, and they ended up backing someone else and took the votes away from the Liberals. So after the election, I think he was just bitter myself. He said he was disappointed in his party's performance and said they didn't move fast enough on Trump-related concerns. I and the Liberals are doing much better with that, you know, pissing him off to the point of, "I don't wanna negotiate." They're doing a much better job. The Conservative reaction, it's just unbelievable. Conservative MP Aaron Gunn called him a coward. I would use another word for him, but, man, I don't wanna get, you know, censored here. And then you have Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman said, "He's betraying his constituents," which I agree. They voted him to be a conservative and vote on their behalf, and they voted in a conservative. You know, you have also Glenn Motz, who said his constituents voted for a conservative MP, and Entremont, he literally betrayed their trust. So what's the question here? He's not wrong. Detriment ran on the conservative platform for just 6 months ago. His voters marked their ballot for conservative representative, and now they have a liberal one. Is this about principles or personal grievances? You decide. But when a politician switches parties after winning on one platform, it raises questions about who they're really representing. You know, is it their constituents and their values or their own career interest? Who knows? I think he has some he didn't get voted in with his own conservatives, and he's like, "Screw you," in my opinion. So after all this political theater that was going on, what does this actually mean for regular Canadians? So kind of wanted to spell this all out as well. So if the Liberal budget passes, here's what's gonna happen. There's gonna be more infrastructure spending, you know, better roads, transit, housing, so they say. There's gonna be a bigger military, and if you care about defense, this is a huge issue, and a larger deficit that will eventually needs to be paid through some combination of higher taxes, spending cuts, or economic growth. But immigration cuts need to happen, and temporary residents like students and foreign workers need to be slashed by 50%. My opinion, they need to be slashed by 100%. Again, you got to put the mask on yourself to save yourself, and bringing in all these immigrants who are affecting the housing. Canadians don't have enough housing because they bring in many immigrants, and there's not the housing for them, which is so confusing. I used the analogy the other day. It's like you have a sold out concert, and then you bring another 10,000 people there with tickets, and they're going, "Oh, where's our seat? Where's our seat?" And it's just you can't do that. And you just don't have the infrastructure to bring in the amount of immigrants that you have. You know, so what happens if the conservatives win and implemented their plan? Lower income taxes, so that could result in more money in your pockets, maybe. Aggressive natural resource development, still a deficit, just a smaller one, and that's supposedly. So, big bet on economic growth that may or may not materialize. So, what's the real talk here? Both parties are promising they can deliver services, cut taxes, and manage debt. Both are being optimistic about economic growth. But here's the kicker: they can get it down to really hard choices. The economy is expected to grow about 1% in 25-26, significantly lower than the 2% forecasted earlier. The weaker labor markets for the extended periods is going to affect it. So that's what the experts are saying. So when the economy slows, government revenues drop. When revenues drop, spending stays high, deficits balloon. And when deficits balloon, future governments have less flexibility to respond to crisis. Whether that's a pandemic or recession or a climate disaster, or I don't know, maybe unmanageable tariffs. I found this was very interesting here. The amount of people, and have a look here. They were polled on, I'm willing to accept slower economic growth in Canada if it means greater economic independence from the United States. So for 70, pretty much 70% say they will take smaller, shorter economic growth, and 20% are disagreeing with that. They I don't know. My opinion, they need to get on board some kind of reasonable tariffs between the United States and Canada, and they need to put a sharp fuse into the economy in Canada and do it quickly. The politicians are betting that their plans will spark enough growth to cover the costs, but you know these risks are very much risky for the economy in such a fragile state. But here's the thing: Finance Minister Champagne says this is not a transformation; it's a generational shift. Again, the generational. And maybe he's right, or maybe we're watching two political parties promise the moon while hoping nobody checks the math. The Liberals want to spend their way to prosperity. The Conservatives want to cut taxes and unleash the economy. Both strategies have worked in the past, and both have failed spectacularly before. And somewhere in Nova Scotia, Chris d'Entremont's constituents are wondering what they actually voted for. I'd be really upset if I was in Nova Scotia and I voted for Conservative and he decides to jump ship. I think he's making decisions on others' behalf, and it's not what they voted for. So the budget vote is coming. And if it fails, we might have another election, because apparently what Canada really needs right now is more political uncertainty. So guys, let me know your thoughts. Like I said, I think that they need to put a fuse in the economy right now. And it's crazy what's going on. It's like you can't have the government that's been in power for the last 10 years, and you're just voting, in my opinion, you're just voting for more of this. We already know what they can do. Is essentially what's happened in the States is the Democrats are running on, in the last election, oh, we're gonna bring down inflation. We're gonna do all this stuff. But if you look at the graph from inflation from 2020 to 2024, it's like it goes off the charts. Like, so you created the inflation. So now, like, if you're that smart and have all the answers, why wouldn't you have curved it a long time ago? So the same thing with the Liberals. I think that the reason that Canada is where it is now is because of the hole that the Liberals dug. They've been in power for 10 years. You guys have voted them back in, and it's like it's insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. If you voted for the Liberals for the last 10 years and you voted for them again, we'll just expect more of the same. I say, why don't you try something different? I like Poilievre. I think he's a smart dude. So anyways, guys, please let me know your thoughts. Please like, subscribe, share, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks. Bye.